Well, thank you very much, Suryo, for that most erudite, candid, and forthright expose on the relationship, and I'm sure all of us welcome that enormously. Could I now ask our panellists to join Suryo for the Q&A session? And we would welcome this session being as highly interactive and didactic as possible. Our panellists include the Honourable, in fact I should say Professor, the Honourable Gareth Evans, ACQC, and our other panellist, Andrew Barlow. Gareth is an international policy maker and former politician, an academic lawyer and barrister by profession. He represented the Australian Labor Party in the Senate and the House of Representatives for many years, serving as Cabinet Minister in the Hawke and Keating governments, as Attorney General, Minister for Resources and Energy, Minister for Transport and Communications, and most prominently as Foreign Minister. He was leader of the government in the Senate and also for quite some period deputy leader of the opposition. He remains one of the two longest serving federal cabinet ministers in Labor Party history.
Dual prize, who was the other one?
After leaving politics, Gareth was President and Chief Executive Officer of the Brussels-based International Crisis Group, and on returning to Australia was appointed Honorary Professorial Fellow at the University of Melbourne. I might add he also carries that title at the ANU. I'll get to the most recent one, which is Chancellor of the Australian National University, as well, and a classic end on file. In fact, we met the first time in Bali in that context a couple of years ago. Our other panellist is Andrew Barlow, partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Andrew has been with Pricewaterhouse for quite some time. He focuses on providing assurance and non-assurance-based services to telecommunications and technology-based clients. And he's in fact been involved in the early stage of the National Broadband Network rollout, the topic for another day today. Andrew has spent time abroad working in Jakarta, UK, Saudi Arabia, and has also been based in our Sydney office as well as here. So, could I open the debating by passing to you, Gareth, and may I ask you for your views on what is the most significant factor you believe is that we need to attempt to build this relationship to this new plane, which is the call to action?
Well, I want to begin by thanking Suryo for a fantastic presentation which told us exactly what we needed to hear about this relationship. There is no point in gilding a lily which is much less gilded than it should be, given all the factors that should be creating an environment that's much more integrated and much more comprehensive than it is at the moment. We are struggling still to get it right in terms of that basic cultural, political perception of each other. And I think an awful lot of the problem begins at the top. I mean, I have to say that. I'm not a big fan of trickle-down economics, but I am a big fan of trickle-down politics, because I do think the way in which political leaderships of each country perceive each other, relate to each other, talk about each other, engage with each other, is just fantastically important in setting the tone for how other people react. Bottom-up stuff is tremendously important too. When Aliana, Tass and I got together for the first time, and we both became foreign ministers together 25 years ago, 1989, we said, let's stop taking the temperature of this incredibly volatile relationship. Let's stop constantly worrying about its health. Let's just get on with the business of building it, to create ballast. That was the key word. But 25 years later, I mean, that's still what we're saying, because the trouble is, at the top level, at the political level, at the level that gets reported in the media and has an impact in the way in which each society and the business community each society perceives each other, we're not getting it right. We keep on doing things wrong. And I really do think we have to work very much harder in Australia at the senior political level to get it right. And to, I don't want to be partisan about this, but to conduct the language of the last campaign in the way that it was about the votes, the votes, the votes, with a sort of cavalier disregard for the politics, the diplomacy of the relationship with Indonesia and Indonesia's own perceptions of this, laid the foundations for a potentially quite rocky period ahead. It wasn't easy with the previous government. It was still an issue with us as well, but it was made worse by the crudeness of that characterisation and some of the other policy language that went with it. I think things were very much compounded by the spy scandal, which hasn't featured in the discussion so far, but should. I'd be absolutely delighted if Tony Abbott and SBY did resolve the issue privately between them, so that there's not going to be an irritant at that level in the future. But I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that, because we still haven't had what we most need and what we've always needed from day one, and which Barack Obama didn't hesitate to give in the context of Anglo-Local, not that it's completely got rid of the problem there. And that's an apology. A straightforward, simple apology for profoundly offending our nearest neighbour. It's not as if we had to accompany that by an awful lot of grovelling about what we would do or not do in the future. We've got into that debate now. We've talked about codes of conduct and so on having to be negotiated, and God knows how that's ever going to be negotiated satisfactorily. All that was needed was a simple apology and an accompanying statement saying, look, in the light of what's happened, we'll review our collection policies and priorities. And I know, because I was in Indonesia at the time, talking to very senior people at foreign minister level, I know that probably would result, but we've got very stiff-necked about it. And so it goes on. I mean, in the inability, and little things. I mean, the rookie era of going to Japan and saying Japan's our best friend in Asia. It was a rookie era because politics, diplomacy 101, nobody's your best friend. You have no greater friend than A and B and C and D. I mean, that's the way you just do it, but we didn't do it. And that played, I think, very badly into our near neighbourhood, as just not being sensitive to it. So you've got to really work very hard. I mean, Hawke and Keating worked very hard, I worked very hard, a number of foreign ministers, I think Julie Bishop's actually working very hard indeed. But there's an awful lot of baggage to get over, and I'm worried that we will move into a new presidency with a new cast of characters. Jokowi, who doesn't really know us at all, Pala does, and others in the vice presidential states of both. Prabowo knows us all too well. We know Prabowo all too well. That's not really easy. But we have with SBY, we have with Mati Natlagawa, who after all, you know, threw newspapers over Canberra front fences while he was getting his doctorate here in Australia. With people like Vice President Budiono, with Murray Pengistu, we had people who knew us, who were fond of us, and that was reciprocated. We're moving into uncharted waters. So I really think policy makers, decision makers, opinion makers, business leaders have to listen very, very carefully to that set of very clear messages that Suryo gave us today, and just get our act together and treat this neighbour of ours. Fourth biggest country in the world, biggest Islamic country in the world, third biggest democracy in the world, massive economic opportunity. We just have to treat this country not just with formal respect, but genuine respect, because this is a relationship that is hugely important to us for all the reasons we're all acutely aware. But it starts at the top, and we've got to get it right at the top.
Thank you very much, Gary. I think I could sum that up. It's really the subtlety of the relationship which is so important.
We didn't get much subtlety from me there. It's the subtlety of the relationship that's absolutely right.
Could I pass to Andrew, who's lived and worked in Indonesia?
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on building further on what Gareth was just saying, but down to the nuts and bolts and the practicalities of doing business between our two countries?
Sure. Thank you, Suryo and Denmark, for an incredibly refreshing and very open and honest presentation. My time in Indonesia goes back, I had 4 years from 2005. Many of the topics that Suryo brought up today would have not been talked about back then, certainly in the environment that I was in Indonesia. It's very clear that the business case for combining and getting together is a slam dunk. It's really the question of how do you do this? The forces of globalisation are really pushing us together here, and at some point we're all going to have to kind of work together. Maybe I'll just offer a personal perspective and then one from a business perspective as well, my time being there. A lot of my work involved working with some of the very senior people who ran the telecommunications companies in Indonesia. And I can reinforce that on their agendas throughout those years I was there was the awareness of the KPK or the KPK and how important it was to address corruption as part of their business dealings. It is on their agenda, it's there, it's real, it's in the audit committee rooms that are being discussed through. There are clearly some differences in how businesses works and is performed. However, I think the same agenda exists, the same agenda item exists there. On a personal level, I think you really have to get to understand who you're working with, and you need to be able to adapt. Agility of thinking, flexibility, and just learning to want to work with the people around you as well. Some of the personal experiences that I had with the top 6 partners from our PwC office in Jakarta, waiting for 3 hours outside for the audit committee to allow us to come into a meeting in Jakarta. If you translate that into your environment, or perhaps an American environment, I question how many people would feel waiting for 3 hours was acceptable. In a business environment in Jakarta, you wait. And there are many different things which we need to adapt, to learn, to understand. The concept of jam karat, or rubber time, as it is in Indonesia. Nothing is ever exact. You need to be able to understand that you've got to work within those, and the mindsets that we come out with it from a business perspective here in Australia, and indeed other partners, aren't necessarily the mindsets, if at all, that will work in that environment. And that's a make or break. That's either going to drive you mad, or you're going to love it and stay and flourish. And I think sort of my question out to everybody, or the message, is really to learn to adapt and to work on the how, because it's down at that grassroots level of learning how to work together.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Can I now throw it open to the floor, and particularly ask, could you state your name and the organisation that you represent, and we would welcome your thoughts. Who's going to open the back? Mike's there. Oh, there we go. All the way to
Colin Benjamin, Life Business. You mentioned the limitation of brand awareness. What are the barriers to building a better international marketing relationship and strengthening the brand exchange?
All right. Hi, Colin. How are you? The simplest way to address this is to say, if ANZ can be there in banking and be so high profile and successful as an Australian bank, then how come Wesfarmers aren't there? That's a major brand. They know their business. Why isn't Coles in Australia? In the retail market, if you look at the success stories of the people coming into the country, buying their way in, buying up Indonesian companies into the retail sector, there's a lesson there. You can build a brand, you can buy a brand, but we've got brands of our own that we need to move into the consumer economy of Indonesia. Because when people see our brands, that is when the friendship gets translated into relationship. And I'll simply say to you, Colin, it's not a difficult challenge. My view, and I'll probably get belted for this, but I think Wesfarmers and Woolies have it too good here, too easy to go work the streets in a difficult market like Indonesia. Have I answered your question? Thank you.
more questions, please.